Hello and welcome back to Ganesh Institute channel. So in today's video we are going to discuss about literature criticism and its theory. So we are having a subject which is MEG05 for MA English course. Now let's begin. What do you mean by literature criticism? Basically, what is literature and its criticism and theory behind it? So here you can see that literature, basically, if you see the definition of literature, it evolves with time. It is never as same. It just keeps growing and something is continuously adding into it. Okay, so if you talk about the definition during the time of Raymond Williams, then he said that literature can be considered any written or printed matter on any subject. Okay, that will be referred to as the literature. But when it comes to Matthew Arnold's, that means the time between 1822 to 1888. So you can consider that according to him, literature is an imaginative writing. It contains all the imaginative writing, be it poetry, fiction, or drama. Then when we comes into that age where industrial revolution was introduced, that means 1750 to 1850, because there was a growth of printing industry and hence mostly papers were printed and there was a leisure time for the middle class. They used that time in increasing or enhancing their literacy rate by reading books, and hence in this way middle class and their culture got associated with literature. So that is also one aspect. That means in Europe, leisure time of the middle class was associated with the literacy to read books, and in this way culture was introduced to literature. So this is about the definition of literature mentioned in unit 1. Now if we talk about the literary criticism, then you will see, use we read so many books every now and then, right? When we read a book and if someone asks us, okay, how was it, how was that book, so we say yes, it was okay, it was brilliant, it is not as good as I thought of. So in that sense your reply can be in yes or no, right? So what was that? Your yes or no simplifies or signifies the act of rationale into your perception, correct? What you think, what you interpret from your reading, that is what your answer will reflect, correct? So that is the literary criticism. That means you are understanding and interpreting your literary experience, whatever you have read or studied. Okay, so this is about the literary criticism. Now, whenever you read a literature, that means a theory is associated in it, and that theory provides us a system so that we can experience more organized and senseful manner by reading it, by reading a text, a form of literature, and interpreting it into a comprehensible form. This is the theory. So it is not only restricted to this definition only. We can also add on points in literary criticism and theory, like if you see here, any work of art, if you are reading a poem, a novel, or anything of that society, so you creates a theoretical perspective. That means your assumptions about that literature. Okay, so these two things are interconnected. These literary criticism and theory are interconnected because your assumptions, based on your perspective, your assumptions about literature, you criticize, you talk about that literature in a good or bad manner. Okay, then it comes to communication chain. See, we need some communication skill in order to understand, in order to explain what we have read, correct? So communication chain is nothing but it helps us to differentiate between theories, by looking at, the art, the literature form which we have read as an act of communication. That means, let's say, there is an author, okay? You are reading that context written by that author. So that person will be considered as an addresser. Then, because when he was writing that thing, maybe it could be, let's say, or an autobiography or a poem or a novel, anything, any fictional story. So some coding was there, some text or message by which he or she was writing at that time. But now you are a reader, you are an addressee. How you are reading it, how, up to what extent you are interpreting it, that makes a sense, that makes the literary criticism. So communication chain has got three structure, tripartite structure. That means it has got one addresser, then the coding, and then the reader, okay, the addressee. So this makes a communication chain of interpreting the literature. Okay. Now, it is not only about literary criticism. I mean, we have got critics, those people who do literary criticism, but we have another theoretical aspect also, with which we can assume any theory a good or bad one. Like, if some work is still required in that literature, how we can say so. So based on that, we have got theory before theory. So when we talk about theory before theory, then there is a concept called liberal humanism. So basically, according to the liberal humanism, we are interconnecting literature with some human values, how we can interpret it. Okay, so in that sense, it is said that literary value is transcendental. That means, if you see, it is very important to understand its value. And every literary value has got a literary text which contains its own meanings, own message within itself. And if that, let's say, if a literary text is good, then it doesn't require any elaboration, any elaborate process of placing it within a context, be it socio-political, autobiographical, or literary historical. Okay, so literary literary humanist or liberal humanist approaches something when we are having words on the page and we are interpreting them, but based on their primacy and self-sufficiency. What do I mean with that? Let's say there are, you can consider eight values of liberal humanism. First of all, any literary value will be considered good, transcendental, if it is good enough to understand text well. That means theory must be detached from the context and it should be studied in isolation. It should make a sense in its own term by itself. Then, because we know human nature is essentially unchanging in that, let's say if it is belonging to drama, then it should have that sense only. It should not comprise of anything else in between. So that will be considered as liberal humanism approach to literary value. Then it should have individuality in unique sense. Okay, it should have some interest. It should have, the purpose of literature should be enchantment of life. That means it should propagate. It should propagate human values. Okay, it should be interesting for a person who is reading it. And also, it should form and content in literature should be focused in an organic way. How? In an organic way, that means if we are talking about one thing, so another thing should grow from it inevitably. That means everything should be interlinked. There should be a flow in literature. Then we have got sincerity. So sincerity means, if some, let's say we have got a content, so it should have truthfulness towards experience. Let's say if it is a literature, it is a reflection sort of writing. That means writer is about to say what he has felt during a particular moment. So it should have truthfulness towards the experience, honesty towards the self, and the capacity for human empathy and compassion. Because we are interlinking the theory, the literary value, with humanism. So obviously sincerity should be there. And it is a quality which inheres in the language with which the literature is made. Okay? Then literary value is said to have silent showing. That means you need to demonstrate something, and it should be silent showing rather than the explanation, and you are just boasting of and saying it. You have to represent it with an example. Then there is very important thing which is work of criticism, of course, because it includes interpretation of text, whatever you have done in all these parts, whether it is interpreting in the same sense, that will be considered in this part, which is criticism. And it interprets the text and interlink it with it acts as a mediator between the text and the reader. Okay, so this is from my side about literature criticism and its introduction. We will take further topics later on in our next video. So till then, take care of yourself and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Bye bye.